Joe Brezny, welcome to KTNV. Thanks for coming on the program. So let's talk about this. Coalition to regulate marijuana like alcohol.
Yeah.
But it's not really like alcohol. It's different.
Yeah, I would say it is different. I think if you look at this objectively, it's less harmful to your body, it's less addictive, it's less likely to be associated with criminal behavior or violent behavior. So it's something where it doesn't make much sense that we've treated this like this special class, this plant as this special thing that's bad, when we've successfully regulated alcohol for decades and we saw that prohibition didn't work. And there isn't any science that doesn't back up the fact that marijuana is safer than alcohol.
Well, there isn't as much science with marijuana as there is
Correct.
with alcohol. And what I meant by that is not what you meant, which is interesting in the sense that you're limiting the amounts that people can have. You're putting a lot more prohibitions, to use
Right.
a word you won't like, than is put on alcohol, which indicates to me you think it's not as safe as alcohol.
No, I think that the intent behind that is that we take small steps, that we take incremental steps, because we're doing something very big. We're ending marijuana prohibition. It's something that's been there for decades. And so instead of moving the needle wildly and just moving things in big steps, if you take a look at what Oregon has done, when Oregon passed their retail marijuana law, they started with releasing just flower, just the marijuana flowers to be sold first, and they waited a few months. Then they did very limited amounts of extracts, and they waited a few months. And that gave them a chance to kind of stair-step this in, and we've learned things along the way. We've learned things every step of the way in this state and in other states. So I think that limiting it at first, at least, is a great idea.
If I'm right, there's still just 4 states that have legalized marijuana and DC.
Yeah.
So why now? Why now in Nevada? It's kind of been tried before. It didn't quite work out. Has there been enough of a cultural change, do you think, here and in the country? I mean, 4 out of 50 states is not too many.
It's not too many, but if you look at how Nevadans feel about this, there's one of the stronger support levels here for regulating this, and I think it's because we see things like how we regulated gaming to the gold standard here, and then 41 states kind of learned how to do it from us, and we sell alcohol here to both our tourists and our locals, and we manage that market well. And when I think it's finally safe for people in suits and ties to go on TV and say marijuana is safer than alcohol, and it's something that it doesn't make sense that we should criminalize adults that choose this substance over a beer after work. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think it's beyond time, and I think if we really look at the system we have of prohibition, we're doing a disservice to those adults who they're not addicts and they're not criminals, but if they get caught with a joint, they get a choice to be called one or the other. And that's not fair to them. It's not fair to our young people to end their options to go to law school or medical school or serve in the military because they chose to smoke a joint at a party. There's a lot of disservice being done to our citizens, and it's been a really expensive failure as well. It's something where we're chasing our tails, spending 80% of our drug enforcement budget on this, when this killed 0 people last year, and prescription drug overdoses killed 47,000 Americans. We're going after the wrong things. We're trying to fix the wrong problems.
When you say killed 0 people, you don't really know that for sure, though, do you?
There were no marijuana overdoses last year, 0.
We're just talking about marijuana overdoses,
correct.
But you don't know of someone who was involved in a DWI with an accident who killed somebody.
I was talking about overdoses.
Okay, so overdoses is one thing. It's interesting, though, you mentioned gaming, because that would seem to be a better analogy than alcohol, by the way, because alcohol has been totally accepted, and it's not really regulated that much. I can go into a bar and I can have 15 drinks. You're not going to be able to go into a retail marijuana business and get 15 joints, right? It's not going to work. But gaming, when it was first approved, had a real stigma. Was only isolated right to a couple of places, then became more and more accepted. That's what you really think is going to happen with marijuana, right?
I do, and I think that that's a good description of the transition that we're going to make here. I think that the alcohol reference was because they're both consumables. They're both things that you put in your body, and they're both things that have an effect on your mind.
I thought it was just done for public relations to make it more palatable, no?
No. No, I think it makes sense to people that if you can have a beer after work and consume that, it should make sense that if you just choose to smoke a joint instead, that doesn't make you a bad person, and you shouldn't get hassled for it. You should be able to go in and purchase this without getting hassled, make sure it's tested, make sure it's safe, make sure you're paying your taxes on it, make sure the government has decided where and when it can be sold and who's allowed to sell it. This is just a better way. Prohibition, more and more people are realizing that all they have left is to scream that the sky is falling where we've chosen to regulate this and that it's not working, and their message just isn't true.
I guess I want to cover several areas with you, but I guess people may not be familiar with the details of this completely. Essentially, it would do some decriminalization a little bit. It would allow essentially marijuana to become recreationally legal. People could sell it, but there would be a bit of a barrier to entry to get into this business. You'd have to pay large fees to the state. I think $5,000 up front, and then significantly more later on. And why are those fees so high?
Well, I think if you look at states like Ohio that tried that plan where they were going to put 10 people into their constitution and that was it forever, that was something that was really an oligopoly. And then if you look at states...
Failed in Ohio.
It did fail because of it.
Right.
And then if you look at states like Oregon, where it's a wide open market, where if you qualify, if you're not close to another marijuana business and you meet the qualifications for the business license, you can just open up. That's not how we've approached gaming here. You made a really good parallel there. How we approach gaming is we're going to make sure that people are well qualified, we're going to make sure that they can pass a stringent background check, and we're going to be really careful about where we put these. I think that's a great model to follow for this. It's the model we followed for medical marijuana, and I think it's a model we can continue to follow for retail marijuana, and just let adults have that same freedom. And there are some folks out there who may have an interest in trying this for a medical condition that's not currently covered under our restrictive rules, like insomnia or anxiety, and there's a solution for them as well. So I think that the overarching reason that brought me to this is that the prohibition just doesn't work. And regulating this in other states, there's been a couple of problems, but it's been remarkably problem-free, and it's quite obviously a better way to go.
There's also a 15% tax in there, and that money would go directly into the school fund, the so-called distributive school account. Anyone trying to take that money for other purposes?
Well, they can't. I mean, it's directed in this, and they can't change that for 3 years.
But I mean, are they saying, boy, we could have supported you if you would have put it towards something else? Or,
no.
Or is your scheme to get as broad a support as possible by putting the money into education working for you?
Well,
did I say scheme?
We've always tried to have the broadest tent as we could, and we've been criticized for some of the folks that we've invited in. We've always been willing to talk to law enforcement. We've always talked to the medical community. We've always talked to teachers and parent groups. And we've had support from some surprising areas. But I think that, I just think that the regulatory structure that we've proposed is there because it's a good fit for Nevada. We don't want to have that Ohio system where you give 10 people a giveaway. In the failed system in Ohio, they've got a better one going in now. And we're not really a good fit for that Oregon system where it's wide open and you could have them on every corner. I think that the way we propose this is actually a really good fit for the community as well.
You said broad areas of support, somewhere you didn't expect it. I'm curious. I looked at where the money is coming from. You filed 3 or 4 reports already, more than $1 million raised. A lot of it's coming from out of state, from the Marijuana Policy Project, but you do have some support in state. I saw Gary Prim, who is a well-known businessman in the gaming industry. But what about the gaming industry? I don't know if you've heard this or not, but they still have some political influence in this state. Are they on board? Have you been talking to people in the gaming industry?
No, I mean, one of my old bosses is on the gaming control board now. I bumped into him at a movie theater, and we acknowledged that it's probably best that we just don't talk until this thing's over, because we need to be respectful of their prohibition of this. We need to be respectful of the fact that they're honoring their promise to the federal government on these privileged licenses and watching them to the gold standard, and that's okay. Well, like I said before, this is something where, do I think eventually the gaming industry will embrace this? Sure, years and years down the road.
But I mean, you just glossed over it, but the federal government. Marijuana is still a Schedule I drug.
Yes.
Isn't that a serious problem? We're talking about the stigma. This is a real legal problem that with a change of administration, everyone knows the Obama administration hasn't gone after Colorado.
Right.
But we don't know who the next president is.
I mean, Chris Christie said that he would, smoke your weed now because I'm coming after you.
Right.
Now, I don't think that Chris Christie is going to be in a position of power to really do anything to the industry.
You sure? He might be the Attorney General. Are you sure about that?
I don't think he'd get confirmed. But I think that I think that if you look at this year, you're going to have a few more states that pass this and that implement this, and it gets to a point where it's following the same pattern that alcohol prohibition had, where it didn't work. It obviously didn't work. The criminal element took hold. Then a few states said, we think we can do this better, and ended prohibition in their states. And the federal government finally realized the futility of the failed prohibition and chose to regulate it.
But you will acknowledge that the federal government would be within its rights to come after states that have legalized
This is federally
marijuana.
illegal, yeah.
Right? It's federally illegal.
It's one of the biggest questions when people call me to get into the business. I say, you realize this is federally illegal, right? And a lot of them don't. But this is federally illegal. It's something that prohibition is wrong. It is wrong, and it needs to change, and that's why we're doing this, because you have, like I said before, you have people that are really choosing to consume something less harmful than alcohol, and if they're caught doing it, their choice is you're either an addict, even though 92% of the time you're not, or you're a criminal, even though 100% of the time they're not. That's a terrible set of choices to give our people. We're going to change that.
There is a lot of medical marijuana businesses which are legal in this state. I saw a lot of that money is coming into your campaign too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk we're going to have at KTNV tomorrow, Kevin Sabat, who is very much saying this is the next big tobacco. This is really about an industry hooking people on it in the same way that tobacco did.
Yeah, he says we're bad.
But yes, you are very bad in his mind. I'm sure he'll say a lot more to me on Wednesday. But these medical marijuana folks see money to be made. That's why some of them may care about the patients. I don't want to argue about that. But they see money to be made from the bridge from medical marijuana to legalized marijuana. That's why they are supporting this for business reasons purely, right?
Well, I think if you talk to a number of different people in the marijuana industry, you'd hear a number of different reasons to get in. Some people say, I see this as a business opportunity, and they don't consume it, they don't know a ton about the history of it, but they know how to manage a business, and that's why they got into the business. Then there's the other side of the spectrum, which are activists who've grown up and who have become business people. So I think the motivations among these people differ. I think you have some successful activists who truly want to see this change, and I think you see business people who see that this is a smart business growth for them, that if this passes, it will help them end the prohibition of selling to the tourist industry here, which I think could really help them.
It could be a huge deal. I'm not saying anything against capitalism, but that's clearly why they're interested in this. Let me just present you with a few of the arguments against legalizing marijuana, including in a surprise switch for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which used to be very libertarian, until it was purchased by Sheldon Adelson, who was a vociferous anti-legalized marijuana person. Let me just read you a couple of things, and I want you to respond to them. Legalizing weed would jeopardize the health of countless Nevadans, expose more people to drug abuse and addiction, put excessive stress on the state's healthcare facilities, and do little to relieve the state's bloated prison population.
Okay.
I cannot believe I even let someone as awful as you into this studio.
Okay, so wrong on several points there. The first is they keep saying that we're not producing tax revenue. In Colorado, we promised that from the last fiscal year that we would produce $40 million for the schools. In the first 11 months, we've produced $41 million. And that report will come out with the whole year in about 2 weeks. So,
but the Colorado experience has not been flawless. I think you'll acknowledge that, right?
No, absolutely
there
not.
have been problems
and we get to do
in
it better.
Colorado.
Yeah, we get to do it better. Like if you look at, I'm sure there's something on there about edibles, that they'll say that kids are getting access to edibles. And there was a problem in Colorado with people making these marijuana edibles that would have 16 doses in a cookie. Who's going to break up a cookie into 16 doses? But, in the counterfeit market, in the black market, for 40 years, you've had hippies making pot butter and making brownies and taking them to parties and causing trouble with that because that's an edible that's not regulated. So the industry came forward and said, let's put together some maximum dosages. Let's put together some packaging requirements for childproof packaging. Let's talk about RFID tags to track who this is sold to so that if it ends up in a kid's hands, we can find out who bought it at the point of sale and hold them responsible. It's kind of like if you catch a kid with a bottle of beer in school. The first two questions they ask them are, do you have a fake ID and who sold this to you? If you catch a kid with a bag of weed in school, you ask what 3 friends of yours are selling it, because that's the system that we've got, is the cartel black market system.
But you're bringing up kids, which I think is a lot of people's objection to this,
Yeah.
and that's why the alcohol analogy works. Now, whether the drinking age is 21 or 18 somewhere, alcohol is legal. Kids don't start drinking generally at what the legal age is. They see something as legal for adults, they think, oh, it's okay to use it. Why won't that happen with marijuana?
I think that ship has sailed a long time ago because marijuana isn't hard to get in America. And so the marijuana prohibition has failed so miserably that there's marijuana in our community already. And so the problem that we've got is kids already see that and they already think that. but it's being sold through their schools. And so we don't have that protection that we get with the regulated market. And if you look at Europe,
Well, you're not regulating the kids. The kids are still going to, they may change the mindset.
it's harder
Yes,
for them to get.
Well,
We're going to make it harder for them to
you
get.
really think it'll be harder
Absolutely. It will absolutely be harder for them to get. And if you look at, there was a study that was just released in Colorado that showed that there's no statistical increase in teen usage rates under a regulated market.
That, right.
And that's because their access is shifting. It's going from being pushed by the cartels through the schools to them trying to do what they do to their dad's liquor cabinet, where they drink some vodka, pour water in, and then make sure it goes back up to the same line. They're going to start doing that. That we can police. That we can talk to parents about. That we can be responsible as a business community in educating our consumers on how to lock this up and get it away from your kids so that they don't have access to it. And it's something where making it, the argument that it's going to become more available once it's regulated is hogwash. It's going to be tested.
More acceptable, though. Sure, it'll be regulated. Pot is regulated now. It's against the law. Kids still use it. Why wouldn't more kids use it once it becomes legal?
Ever since we've regulated it in Denver, our opponents have screamed louder. I don't think it's become more acceptable there. I think it's something that people the whole time thought, this isn't a huge deal. It doesn't seem right that we're demonizing this plant when alcohol is very permissive and is sold on every street corner. And when you have that prohibition fail, you don't see, there's been a slight increase in people 50 to 65, and we're seeing them move away from opiate drugs and toward marijuana as a pain relief. I'll take that. I will. If that's the big spike that we have with marijuana regulation, I'll take it.
What's the polling show on this, do you think?
There's been a couple different polls. We had a poll a few months ago that was a PPP poll, that the auto dialer polls. We did one 2 years ago that was 54% support. We had 57% support a few months ago, but then there was
not a lot. Initiatives need generally to start higher than that, right?
Yeah, and then Rasmussen brought us in at 50-41.
Right.
So it's going to be tight. We think it's going to be tight. We've been prepared for a tough campaign for 2 years now, and we're starting to execute our final end game. And I think that it's going to be a tight victory for us, but we've got the truth on our side. We've got local business people who've done a great job with the medical marijuana community on our side. And people now have a more open mind. They're willing to listen to people who say, we can do this. We can do this better than the black market.
All right, Joe Brezny, it's been a pleasure having you on. I hope maybe you'll come back. We'll have a debate on this. We want to track this issue. Thanks for coming in.